So we spent some time with multiplying and dividing rational numbers. Now we're going to look at adding and subtracting rational numbers. So for our first example, it says, in science class, Ron recorded -3/10 degree of Celsius as a starting temperature of a saltwater solution. To complete his experiment, he needs the temperature of the solution to increase by 4/10 degrees Celsius. What will Ron record as the ending temperature of the solution? So part A wants us to write an expression to show how to calculate the final temperature. Well, writing as an expression is just writing the problem without the equal sign. So he started at -3/10 of a degree Celsius, and it says to complete the experiment, he needs the temperature of the solution to increase by 4/10. So increase means go up, so we're going to add 4/10. And oops, this is an expression, so we don't want that equal sign. And then part B is, what is the ending temperature? Well, when we add fractions, we have to make sure we have the same denominator. And in this case, we do. They're both 10. And we're not going to add them. We're just going to bring that 10 over. So we have -3/10, and we're going to add 4/10. So you just add the top two numbers. What's -3 plus 4? That would be 1. So the end result will be 1/10 degrees Celsius. Explain how adding -3/10 and 4/10 are like adding -3 and 4. Well, when you're adding fractions, you just carry over the denominator. And add the top. So adding fractions, add numerators, and bring over the denominator as long as it's the same. So the only thing we really had to add when we were adding those two fractions are the numerators. Okay, for our next example, a bird bath is filled to the top. On day 1, the volume of the water in the bowl decreases by 7/8 of a cup. On day 2, the volume of the water in the bowl decreases by 3/4 of a cup. What number represents the total change in the volume of the water in the bowl after 2 days? On day 1, the water decreased by 7/8. So decreases means goes down. So this is a -7/8. On day 2, the volume of the water in the bowl decreases by 3/4. So we're going to take away another 3/4 of a cup. So we have -7/8 minus 3/4 of a cup. So we need a common denominator. So we're going to look at the 8 and the 4. It looks as if I could take that 4 and make it an 8, and that way I would not have to change that 7/8. So we're going to keep the 7/8. We're going to minus, now to make that bottom number an 8, that 4, I would have to times by 2. And if I times by 2 at the bottom, I have to do the same thing at the top. So 3 times 2 would be 6. Now I can bring that 8 over, and I have -7 minus 6 at the top. And that's just like two negatives. So we would add them. 7 plus 6 is 13, and they're both negative. So my answer is negative. And then I would have to make this proper. How many 8s are in 13? Well, there'd be one of those. That would be at 8, and then to get to 13 would be 5 more, and then we keep the 8 as a denominator. So the total change in the water, it went down -1 5/8 of a cup after the 2 days. And then we have this example, -2.5 minus 2.5. So they're both negative, so we are going to add them, and we can do that a couple of different ways. We could make them both improper, or since we have to add them because they're both negative, I could simply add their whole numbers. So 2 and 2 make 4, and we know it's going to be a negative. And then 1/2 plus 1/2 is another whole. So I have a -4 and another 1, which is going to be negative because both numbers are negative. If I add those together, I would have -5. Okay. The other way, make them improper. So 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So 2.5 is 5/2. That's negative minus another 5 over 2. So we're going to bring the 2 over. And then we have -5 minus 5 on the top, which would be -10. And if we do -10 divided by 2, we get -5. Okay, so a couple different ways to think about that particular problem. All right, Susan's cat loses 1 1/4 pounds. So keyword is loses, so that goes down 1 1/4. Then loses another 1/8, so minus another 1/8. What is the total change in the cat's weight? So we don't have the same denominator. We're going to have to change that, but first let's make the -1 1/4 improper. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So this is -5/4 minus 1/8. So again, I can leave that 8 alone and I can make that 4 into an 8. So I'm going to times by 2 on the top and the bottom of the 5/4. So I'm going to have -10/8 minus 1/8. So we're going to carry over that 8. And then we're going to do -10 minus 1. So they're both negative. So we add them and give them a negative sign. So it's -11/8. Then how many 8s go into 11? That's 1. And then 8 to 11 would be 3 left over. And we keep the denominator of 8 and make sure we bring over that negative sign. So the cat lost 1 3/8 pounds altogether. Julia is playing a computer game. To enter a new quest, she has to pay a tax of 2.5 points. So if she's paying it, it's going out, so -2.5. But she expects to earn means we're going to add on 7.5 points. For each quest, how many points can she gain overall? So I have -2.5 plus 7.5. If I rewrote this, I would have 7.5 is positive, and then I have minus 2.5. So I can switch those around, put the positive number in the front, and then just make sure that negative sign goes with that 2.5. Now, when we're adding or subtracting decimals, we have to line up the decimals. So they have to be lined up, and we're going to subtract. So 5 minus 5 is 0. Bring your decimal down. And 7 minus 2 is 5. So I end up with an answer of 5.0, which is just 5. So she can gain 5 points for each quest. Another example here, -4 1/2 plus 7 1/2. So again, a couple of different ways. I can look at the whole numbers. This is a negative, and this is a positive. And if we're going to break it up into whole numbers and fractions, we got to remember that that 1/2 is going to be -2 because that whole number is negative. So we have -4 and 7, and that would leave us with 3. And then I have that -1/2, and I have a +1/2 because that 7 is positive, so is that 1/2. So a -1/2 and a +1/2 cancel out and make 0. So I would have an answer of 3. Now if I made these improper, I would have 9/2, -9/2, plus 15/2. So I could carry over that denominator of 2. And then -9 plus 15 is 6. And 6/2 is the same thing as 3. So whichever way you look at it, whichever way is easier for you to understand, is fine with me on how you are going to solve those. This one we have 2 1/2 plus -3 1/2. So we have the positive number in front, and we're going to subtract 3.5 from it. 2.5 plus a negative 3.5. So what we could do is remember the rule from when we were adding and subtracting integers, and remember that if they were different signs, I could ignore the negative and do the big number minus the little number. So I would do 3.5 minus 2.5 and make sure that you line your decimals up. So 5 minus 5 is 0. Bring your decimal down. 3 minus 2 is 1. And so I have 1.0, which is really 1. And then go back and look. Is 2.5 or 3.5 the bigger number? 3.5 is the bigger number. And what is its sign? It's negative. So our answer would be negative.